Good evening, everyone. Can I have a motion to resume public session? Yep. Ms. Littlewood, Ms. Coffey, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. We're in public session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
You're right. It is.
Thank you. Next, we have a proclamation from New York State Senator Jeremy Cooney.
So good evening, everybody. We recently received a New York State Senate proclamation, and at this time it's my honor to present it to the Board of Education from the New York State Senate, conferred by State Senator Jeremy Cooney of the 56th Senate District. This proclamation by Senator Cooney recognizes the Gates Chiley Performing Arts Center upon the occasion of the ribbon-cutting ceremony on March 31st, 2022.
1, 2, 3.
The proclamation reads, whereas it is the intent of this legislative body to honor and celebrate those institutions that contribute to the education, professional success, and artistic fulfillment of the citizens of this great state, and whereas, attendant to such concern, I, New York State Senator Jeremy A. Cooney, am justly proud to recognize the Gates Chiley Performing Arts Center at Gates Chiley High School upon the occasion of the ribbon-cutting ceremony on March 31st, 2022, and whereas, the brand new GCPAC, part of Gates Chiley High School, came to fruition because of the unwavering support of the Gates Chiley community and tireless efforts of SEI Design Group and Watchdog Building Partners, and whereas community members cast votes in support of the project and its promise to bring the performing arts at Gates Chiley Central School District into the future, and this promise will surely be kept. And whereas students from any of the Gates Chiley Central School District schools will have a chance to participate in concerts and shows at the GCPAC. These experiences will salute past Gates Chiley traditions and set the stage for new ones that incorporate state-of-the-art theater technology. And whereas the ribbon cutting comes at the end of Music in Our Schools Month, an annual celebration that encourages music educators, students, and communities from around the country in promoting the benefits of high-quality music education in schools. And whereas students can eagerly look forward to many years of high-quality artistic experiences at the new Gates Chiley Performing Arts Center. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, New York State Senator Jeremy A. Cooney, celebrate the GCPAC at Gates Chiley High School upon the occasion of the ribbon-cutting ceremony on March 31st, 2022. So on behalf of the Gates Chiley Central School District, we want to thank Senator Cooney for this proclamation and for recognizing the efforts of many throughout our district.
Thank you. Agenda changes?
We've had some agenda changes to personnel and to some action items, as seen in the agenda.
Thank you for that. So tonight for Vice President comments, I just would like to, on behalf of the board, just the word of the day, and I think I would like the word of the day to be patience. We just want to thank everyone in advance, and past and present, for your patience with our students, patience with our staff, patience with our community, just having patience, because in the time that we are right now, we're kind of still in the flux, right? Different things are happening, different things are changing, and I think patience is like crucial for all of us to be able to do everything that we need to do in the land of education. So I just like to thank everyone on behalf of the board in advance for having patience and making sure that we are all giving each other that as well. Points of interest. Ms. Coffey.
Hi. So I have a couple points of interest since our last meeting to share. The first one I want to share was the middle school art show. I took my younger child, the one who's not middle school, with me because she's so into art. and she was super excited to do. They had scavenger hunts there for everybody to do. Almost every child and some adults that I passed were doing the scavenger hunts, but it was a really great way to have everybody that was there engage with the students' artwork. It was spread throughout large sections of the building. It was very well presented, well organized. You got to see all the kids' names on their artwork, and just seeing how many family members were there and how proud everybody was, both the kids and their adults. It was a really great feeling, a great vibe throughout that night. Also had the opportunity to attend the BOCE's annual meeting, which is an event that I love to be able to partake in. You see a lot of our students and students from other districts throughout this area really putting forth the work that they've learned throughout the school year and getting to show off with pride all of the hard work and skills they've been learning that will help them in their future careers. And then the final thing I have to share was I participated in the National School Board Association Conference and attended several different sessions, different learning experiences on a wide variety of topics. Some of the topics that I was able to learn about while there had to do with different districts' equity journeys, the science of reading, using policy to promote diversity within your district, community wellness, and different ways to eliminate barriers to learning. So it was a wide variety of topics presented, and the presenters were from all different states, including some from New York, and really taking advantage of that opportunity to learn about education throughout our country. Now I'm done.
Well, thank you. Any other points of interest? Ms. Lutella?
Thank you. I was able to attend the opening of the Performing Arts Center. I want to congratulate everybody on a job well done. The program was excellent. Thank you. More than anything else, so I think that it went well. The ribbon cutting was good. We got enough variety of people up there, so that was good. But it went well. I also attended the academic varsity letter ceremony, which was yesterday, and this is the 25th ceremony. And since I was at the first, it was sort of special to be there to see how it has survived that long. This is exactly not a group of young people who get a lot of credit, unless they also happen to be in athletics for some point. So it was a good variety of students. It definitely was something that showed our attempt to provide a quality education to as wide a diverse group of kids as we possibly can. You know, within obviously what our community can afford. So I think we're trying to do that, and these kids certainly showed that. For those who don't know, the requirement is you need to have 65 quarter grades that are higher than 95%. You know, so again, when you think kids may take 6 courses a year at the most, you're talking about working into their junior year at the earliest to do this. So it was a good group. So that worked out real well, and I appreciate the effort by the staff and of course the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other points of interest? All right. Thank you again. Hearing none, we'll move to report of meetings. Ms. Vestala?
I was able to attend the Monroe County Legislative Committee meeting. The meeting was on Wednesday, and the budget got approved on Thursday last week. So we really didn't have a chance to discuss it. So the budget that's come out looks very good in terms of the amount of support for education, but there's still some issues that need to be worked out. One of the ones that was somewhat modified had to do with low emission or zero emission buses. And it is amazing how some people have come to the conclusion that these buses are going to be able to go 200 miles a day. They can't, not at the moment. The state supposedly put aside a fair amount of money for purchasing and stuff, but you know, the overhead of charging stations and retraining staff and all that. So the guideline is, I think, by sometime in 2035, it's supposed to be zero emission for all vehicles. That's pretty ambitious. Nice goal, but that's one of the issues we'll take up with our state representatives. What the Monroe County School Board Association staff is doing is setting up meetings locally. The staff members were out of Albany real quick after the budget got approved, and the state legislative people half of them were already home, had to go back to do a vote and everything else. So we'll see how that goes. So even though the budget passed, it looks good for having money, but I've been around long enough to remember when we had a lot of money and then all of a sudden we had no money, you know, and it's a cyclic type thing, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It may take 4 or 5 years, but all of a sudden the state's going to say, oh, you know what, guys, we may need to take money back. And the state's done that twice, taking money back out of our state aid to balance their budget. So I tend not to rejoice, you know, a great deal when the governor gives us a lot of money for schools, because it's an election year, first off. So we'll see from there. So we're still working on it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other report of meetings before I report on ad hoc? So the ad hoc committee, the famous ad hoc committee met, and we actually have established dates for our board book study. So we have a date for April, May, and June, and we'll conclude in June, hopefully to look to expand our knowledge in reading Ibrahim Kendai's How to Be an Anti-Racist and our workbook to go with it. Anything else? All right, we will move on to visitor comments. The Gates Child High School District Board of Education invites public comment at this time. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes or less. We ask that individuals state their name and address prior to comments and utilize the podium microphone to address the board. Although the board will not respond directly to individual comments at this time, items brought to the attention of the board may be taken under consideration for future response or action. In order to comply with laws related to confidentiality, we ask that issues related to specific school district personnel or students be brought to the attention of the superintendent of schools privately. The board reserves the right to terminate a speaker's comments if his or her comments are in excess of 3 minutes, are repetitive, or are not appropriate for discussion in an open public forum. So our first visitor's comment is Charles Johnson.
How you guys doing?
Hello.
It's funny that you brought up the whole money issue. I wanted to bring this up also. Is anyone like in the school district complaining about how the New York gave $500 million to build a NFL stadium? You know, if they're talking about taking money away and to building an NFL stadium. Anyways, the other thing I wanted to talk about, I guess there's new reports come out, so at the next meeting I'll make sure I have copies of, I guess, the evidence of wearing masks and not wearing masks for kids and the side effects and so on. So I'll make sure I'll get that the next meeting. My main thing I wanted to bring up is, what do I need to do to request the library to carry the book series Tuttle Twins? Like, it's something educational for kids, especially with current events. It's very educational. When I do get my copies, I'll bring it in so you guys can kind of see yourself, if you're interested. And there was one more thing, hang on. Oh, what do I need to do to ask the town to get more involved into trying to get the residents and local people to kind of get more involved into coming to events? Anything I can request, anything that you can think of, something I can be annoying about? What? Okay. But that's it? Just, I don't know, any request? You guys know what you're doing, I don't. What do you need for me to ask them, to bother them, to get more people involved? To fill the state. Okay. Yep. Nope, that's why I just wanted to get a quick, sure. I will bother you later. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next, we have Maureen Conley.
Hi, Maureen Conley, 507 Valley Creek Road. I come before you tonight as a concerned taxpayer, and I come before you as an even more concerned kindergarten teacher with 32 years of experience, 19 of which are in this district. I have been so blessed this year to have a class size of 16 students, as is the average size of my K-1 teammates. It is really difficult to quantify how valuable this has been returning to school post-pandemic. But I am confident if you took the time to ask any elementary educator, they would agree with me that meeting the diverse needs of our youngest students with classes at anything close to their contractual limits would have been impossible. Many of my colleagues are already doing the impossible. We were informed by our union president that class size was not something that was negotiated as a part of the contract before you tonight. We know now that sections of classes are being cut next year and that our class sizes in many cases are projected to increase. I come here tonight with the support of the 65 undersigned teachers to respectfully request that our district spend our COVID relief money to reduce elementary class size. I am aware that other districts have done this. I know that according to our ARP ESSER application from 2021, no less than 5% of our grant is to be spent on activities to address the academic impact of lost instructional time on our students. What better way to do this than by keeping our class sizes low? The federal ARP statutes require that states reserve ARP ESSER funds for evidence-based activities and interventions that respond to students' social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs. It also states that we must address the way COVID-19 has disproportionately affected students from low-income families, students of color, English learners, and children with disabilities. This is our district. These are our children. What better way to do this than by keeping class sizes low? We are districts striving to strengthen relationships with children and families. What better way to do this than by keeping class sizes low? Our children are truly at risk post-pandemic. They deserve the most attention we can give them. As we prepare to dispense all the COVID relief money by 2024, I beseech you to invest in our children. According to the Brookings Institute, a 32% reduction in class size gave students the achievement advantage equivalent of 3 months after 4 years. Don't our children deserve this? I'm confident that even with my experience and love of children in a classroom of 20 kindergartners, I would be unable to meet all their social, emotional, and academic needs in a post-pandemic America. That breaks my heart. I thank you so much for your time and consideration. And I'm just going to leave you with this.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to take a pause, and I'm going to defer to Ms. Michaela Corral.
Good evening. We wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Andrea Kataya, who will be appointed later this evening as the incoming principal of Paul Road Elementary School. Andrea is here with her family. And we want to wish her the best and congratulate her and let her know how excited we are to have her joining our team. And she will be able to overlap with Mr. Hens, who will be retiring in August. And we look forward to her joining us. And we wanted to take a moment to pause and acknowledge her so that she and her young and beautiful family can get out of here and enjoy their evening. So welcome, Andrea. We really look forward to having you.
Welcome, and thank you, Ms. Corral. So next, we're moving on to budget conversation. Dr. Ball.
Mitch.
Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Richards, Mr. Daly, thank you for having me tonight. I'm here to review the budget conversation. I understand that most of this has already been reviewed by either or the Finance Facility Audit Committee and the Board of Education, but this is the evening when we really bring it all together into one presentation, share it with the board, and maybe have some conversation if it's necessary, although we've had a lot of conversation, have some conversation if it's necessary before the board adopts the budget this evening. Once the board adopts it, then we're able to start doing all the important communication that we need to do and prepare to put out the public referendum on May 17th. So our goal today is just to talk about some guiding questions, see if there's any unanswered questions still, and if there are, to answer those questions before we adopt the budget this evening. So our agenda includes talking about the budget goals and priorities, reviewing the budget ambassador feedback, state of affairs as they currently stand, revenues, expenditures. We'll review the propositions that we're hoping to put out to the public. Next steps, briefly summarize, and then have any board discussion that needs to be had at that time. So our guiding questions, and we framed these a few years ago now, so this is our third year of doing this. Our guiding questions are there any items from the presentation that need clarification? And does this budget reflect the goals and priorities that we've outlined as a board and a district? So we'll go over those as well. So goals and priorities. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to protect our current programming and staffing, to maintain a focus on our district goals. Right now our goals are student-centered learning and culturally responsive practices, in addition to improving graduation rates and test scores. To promote social and emotional competency and build resilience within our students, and to help ensure a positive, safe school environment. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So before we get into that, quickly would like to review, did I miss a slide? No. Quickly like to review budget ambassadors. So our budget ambassador meetings were March 14th and March 28th. You'll notice Mr. Johnson was there for a second year in a row. He is our most senior member of budget ambassadors now, because we've had budget ambassadors for 2 years. So he was the sitting guru on the ambassador team. This year there were 8 participants. There were 10 signed up. The first evening there were 8. The second evening there were 6. So it was decent participation. We had a max of 12, I believe, that could sign up. So here's some comments. What did you find most beneficial? The revenue part was most interesting. I understand spending more so, realizing how much an impact social emotional can impact the budget, for example, since costs can be so high. Time of the presenter, I appreciate the time Dr. Bell took in and out of our meetings. The reserve funding was well explained. Each of these meetings was approximately 3 hours long, so they were long evenings. One of the comments we did receive was that if we're going to have them be that long, we had originally thought they were going to be shorter, and we went a little over on time. So either to extend the meeting length when we communicate it, or go to 3 meetings as we originally had intended. But that's just something we need to think about as we go into next year. Again, what did you find most beneficial? The control that the state has over funding to Gates-Chili, and then the transparency around revenue and expenditures created a clear picture of the district's operations and the primary focus on student learning being equitable, which is a really great thing to hear, because that's one of the things that the board is trying to accomplish in developing budgets. Some recommendations. Continue to engage the community and offer events like Budget Ambassadors Program. Create further paths of communication and transparency to gain further community trust. And then for the first few years, I never understood what I was voting on. I just always voted yes because I wanted a well-funded school, and having an educated population is important to me. But now I understand more about how it's run and the reasons for things, and most of all, where the money comes from. So again, we're really happy to hear this kind of a comment, because the idea of budget ambassadors is trying to demystify what's in the school budget, to break it down so that people can understand it, because there is a lot that goes into it. It is a huge effort on behalf of not only the district administration, but specifically the district staff in preparing a budget. And so if we can demystify what goes into the budget and what our process is and what our thinking is as we go through the process, and then also how we compare with the region and the state in terms of a whole number of metrics, then it helps our community as these budget ambassadors go out into the community, understand exactly what we're doing as a district and how we are spending the limited resources that we have. So those were good recommendations and things, again, that we'll take into consideration, not only in the budget, and we have taken those into consideration, but also as we look towards future budget ambassador sessions. So we do plan on continuing this. Any questions about budget ambassadors before I continue on with the presentation? Yes.
Was the community members who participated, was there just one returning person from last year?
Correct. Yep, just one returning individual. Yep. Any other questions? And we do like having a few returning people if we can, because they're the ones who are able to bridge some gaps and help with the conversation. But we also like to have new people coming in, because those are more people that can go out into the community and have conversations. Okay, state of affairs. So the state of affairs was more murky last year. A lot of things have come into focus this year. With Governor Hochul coming in, she's kind of went in a different direction in terms of funding and how we're funded, and we'll go over that in a little more detail in a few minutes. But one of the things that we do know to be true is that we're in year 2 of the 3-year phase-in of foundation aid. And so for years, over a decade, schools haven't been fully funded to the foundation aid formula, which was a formula that the state was legally required to establish in order to provide an equitable education to students across the state. And so they weren't fully funding it to the formula as required under the regulations. Well, now they've committed to that. The state has committed to that. And so over 3 years, we're going to see bumps in funding that we haven't traditionally seen in the past. Traditionally, we'd see 2 to 4% increase. The increase now is a little more because they're phasing into what they should be paying us. It doesn't mean we're ever going to get back the $130 million that has been withheld from Gates Chili since the foundation aid formula was put in place, but it does mean that they'll start funding us to the full formula level. The other thing that we're seeing is an infusion of federal funds. And so next year will be the 2nd year of those federal funds, with the following year being the 3rd. Interestingly, both of these things are occurring simultaneously. So what does that mean? That means that after 23-24, when we go into 24-25, we will potentially see a dip in funding in both foundation aid and the federal monies that are helping us balance our budget. And so that's just something that we need to consider as we plan for the future, is what are we going to do if, in fact, nothing backfills that funding that we're currently using to support the school budget. Any questions about that? Okay. Revenues. So this is something we've been over before, but we're going to go over it again real briefly. We're assuming the cap. Local sales tax is stable right now. State funding is expected to increase. Long-term impact is unknown. And just going back to sales tax, one quick thing I want to mention about that. Originally, we had assumed a slight increase, but now there's a lot of talk at both the state and local level about not reducing the taxation on fuel. And so we thought that the cost of fuel would increase our sales tax, but now if there's going to be a reduction, we're uncertain if we're going to get an increase in that local sales tax. So we're just going to keep it level for next year. State funding, expecting an increase. Again, the long-term impact is unknown. Other revenues are consistent. Our reserve use, we're keeping that stable. Last year, we increased our reliance on reserves a little bit. This year, we're keeping it stable. We're going into next year, we're proposing to keep it stable. And then again, that federal funding is a 3-year federal funding plan. Yes? Correct. So we're going to go over that as we get a little further into the presentation, really dive into the reserve use that we're currently utilizing. Last year we went way down the rabbit hole and we did all the reserves, but this year we're just going to briefly go over it without getting into the weeds too much. Local property taxes account for 47.6% of this proposal. Again, the tax cap is a calculated or a complicated calculation tied to a lot of factors. Even if CPI is higher than 2%, we're still capped at 2%, which means that all of our costs are going up in terms of fuel and electricity and supplies and materials to put into the classrooms for our students. And even though those things are going up on average around 4.7%, we're still capped at 2% on what we can increase the levy before exclusions. And so then once we factor in our increase for debt service, which is our principal and interest payments, they're like our mortgage payments on our buildings, even after we factor in a slight increase for that, we're still right down near that 2% level. No, I went too far. Here we go. So when looking from property tax to property tax, looking at an increase of about 1.2 million or 2.2%, so just a little over 2% based on those exclusions, with an estimated true value tax rate of 24.58. Noting that 24.58 is tied to this year's equalization rates and assessments, and so if those things change, or if star amounts and things of that nature change, then that could have a marginal impact on that tax rate. But typically, what I see is that tax rate goes down and not up, so I would anticipate that it would slightly go down once we get the full assessment data and equalization rates from the towns of Gates and Chili. Local sales tax, again, there is some uncertainty relating to rising costs, Amazon sales tax, and then one thing that's been talked about a lot amongst the county business officials and across the state is, is marijuana, what is the impact of marijuana legalization going to be? We don't know when those regulations are going to come out so that the dispensaries can start selling marijuana legally, and what will be the impact from a tax perspective. The state is projecting a pretty significant increase due to marijuana sales, so that could increase our local sales tax as well. State funding. This is a big portion of our funding, our second largest. 39.89%. Our current estimate is over $48 million. A significant increase in foundation aid, 1.9 million, with all the other categorical expenses at 1.3 million. If you'll recall, foundation aid, that's our base aid that we get based on the demographics specific to our district. And then the categorical expense-driven aids, those are tied to prior year expenses. So for instance, next year, we'll get aided on our transportation expenses that were from this year that we're in right now. And so we'll get 75 cents on the dollar next year for our transportation expenses this year. Does that make sense? Again, there's a whole bunch of categorical expense-driven aids. Okay, here we go. So a couple of things to note on this slide. Number one, this is our projected state aid for next year. You see that foundation aid, 8%. That is not something I've seen in over 10 years of being a business official. It's really high. However, what I will note is that it's still not keeping up with the increase in cost, and we'll go over that in a few minutes. Some things to note on here, that charter school aid, that went away because we didn't meet the threshold for receiving the charter school transitional aid. We thought we were going to get it last year based on projections. We're just under the 2% threshold to get charter school transition aid. So we didn't get it this year, even though we projected for it, and we won't get it next year. We likely will not. Transportation aid, again, we get a good portion of that back. And building aid, that's specifically tied to our capital projects. So when you see that $737,000 increase in aid, you'll see a corresponding expense. I believe it's about $813,000. So it doesn't fully offset our new expense in debt service, principal, and interest, but it does help offset it. So there's a cost directly tied to that aid, so it's really not making up for what the cost is. So again, that building aid increase is tied to our $68 million project, and it's the last year of major increases in building aid. And so after this year, we'll see that our debt service is flat and our state aid is flat, tied to the $68 million project. Again, what we're trying to do in the project that was approved in February is make sure that there is no local impact on taxes. And so this last project, there wasn't a significant plan in place to ensure savings would buttress the local share. And so going into the next project, we're making sure to do that so that there's no increase in taxes. No other comments on this unless there's questions. Again, this looks a lot different than last year with Governor Cuomo's budget proposal. Last year there was a whole lot of lines on here that didn't really help demystify what's within the state aid proposal. Okay, other revenue count for less than 2%. The current estimate is 1.8 million. This includes things like tuition fees, interest earnings, sale of property, and Medicaid reimbursement. And so, again, one thing to point out for school budgets is that we don't have a lot of control in terms of revenue. We can't invest our money in most things. We can only invest them in things like CDs and treasury notes. We can't go out and invest in the housing market or Tesla or something like that and rake in all kinds of cash through investments. We're unable to do that under regulation. Additionally, we can't sell things, so there's no money to be made in terms of that. So our main two revenues are state aid and taxation. Appropriated fund balance and reserve use, we'll go over this in a minute. Current estimate is 5.6 million. That's what we used last year. That's what we intend to use going into next year. Fund balance, carryover fund balance. So this is money from the prior year's budget that we pull forward into next year's budget. We're planning on maintaining that amount at 2.8 million. Here's the recommendation for appropriated fund balance and reserve use. Again, level. We're not planning on making any changes. We're going to pull forward the same amount that we've used in the past. And if we've developed a good budget, as you've seen in prior years, we'll be able to replenish the majority, if not all of the reserves, to make sure that we're maintaining level reserve funding in order to maintain good financial health and maintain our credit rating so that when we do need to borrow money for things like capital projects, we have very low interest rates. So that's what we're trying to do with the budget, is really keep it balanced. Utilization data, just real briefly, we really want to get down to around 4%. Right now we're at 4.67 in the proposal. So again, we'll try and chip away at that over time. In the current year, we're at 4.79%. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Coffey, do you have any questions about reserve use? Okay. Or what the reserves are, and I can briefly explain them.
No, you've explained this to me before, which is why I feel bad.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand a little bit better when you're saying you want it to 4%?
4% of the budget. So 4% of the budget would be 4.8 million going into next year in the proposal. Right now we're using 5.6. So we would like to get closer to 4.8. And again, that number will go up a little bit as the budget goes up, but it's still a percentage of the budget. So we just want to be mindful of that. So next year it might be up to $5 million would be like a target number. So if we can chip away at that over time, that would be a good thing. That's a healthy target goal. So if you look at the statewide average, it's right around 4%. We're relying a little more on fund balance and reserves than the statewide average. So, yep. Okay, so this is a breakdown of revenue per dollar. And again, it ties back to the percentages that we've already discussed. So as you can see, the two biggest portions, 88%, are in school property taxes and state aid. Okay. So overall revenue snapshot, looking at a 3.78% or $4.4 million increase in revenue. Okay, expenditures. So our proposal is based on a modified zero-based budgeting practice. What does that mean? That means that we start from zero for most things, for nearly everything. Although we know, generally speaking, and when I say zero, so for instance, we talk about what are the programs that we need. We talk about how many students we have at various grade levels, for instance, at the elementary school, and how many staff members do we need to program in based on that information, and then also in terms of supplies and materials. So there's really three main ways to budget. One is a per pupil allocation, but there's equity concerns with per pupil allocations because some kids have more needs than others. Another one is a rollover budget where you just roll over the budget and add a percentage. Obviously, there's issues with that because people will just spend what you give them. Whereas modified zero-based, which I would consider to be the best budgeting methodology, we start from zero and we really have a lot of conversation. And so it's a heavier lift for the district when creating a budget because you have to have conversations about pretty much every program and service that we offer and talk about how do we build a budget based off of zero. So starting at zero, let's build a budget off of that. What are really our needs that we need in the district? And what do we need to do to make sure that we can fund those things? Again, it's a no-frills budget. We don't have as much flexibility because our costs are rising, as you saw, 4.7%, just in terms of growth, on top of the fact that we still have rising costs in health insurance and that big debt service payment that we have to make, for instance. 3.78%, if you'll notice, that's balanced to the revenue projection. So our expenditures and our revenues have to balance in a school budget. Again, a budget that we put out to the public is a plan. It doesn't mean that that's exactly how we're going to spend our money because, for instance, over the summer or even a year from now, so last year at this time we were talking about the money that we need to spend right now. Things can change between a year from today and next year. So if we have a whole bunch of students with really significant needs move into the district, we're going to need a program for them which may change how we're spending our money. So that's something to consider too, and just be aware of is that an expenditure proposal or expenditure budget that we put out to the public is a plan for how we're going to spend our money. It's not necessarily a commitment. So highlighted cost increases, so these are just some of the bigger increases that we have in the budget. TRS salaries, that's our pension costs for our instructional staff. ERS costs, those are our pension costs for our support staff. Oh, sorry, salaries was first, then we go down to pension costs. You can see that those are pretty significant increases. Our health insurance is going up significantly. We are in a consortium. Even though this number is high, 10% increase, even though that number is high, we are in a consortium and we have a lot of buying power, and the rates that we have are still lower going into next year than if we were in a community rated plan. So we're doing better than the market, but we're controlling those costs as much as we can. And then debt service, again, that $813,000, that's tied specifically to our $68 million project. Any questions about the major cost increases built into this budget? Okay, the administrative component, so let me back up. The state asked us to break our budget into a three-part budget: administrative, program, and capital. And so what I'm going to talk about real briefly is those three components and what's included in them very briefly, unless there's questions. So included in the administrative component is the Board of Education. Obviously, the board doesn't get paid to do the work that they do, but there are some costs associated with the work that the board does. Central administration, this is some of the offices here in the building. Central services, you'll see a major increase in central services because we did some recoding regionally. So all the Monroe 2 BOCES districts reshuffled their codes to be more in line with the accounting and reporting manual through New York State. And so this moved out of another code, that 746,000, and into this code. So we're really not spending any more in the budget. It just looks like a significant increase because it got recoded from the technology budget into the central services budget because it is considered an administrative cost. And really this is to run all of the financial software, other forms of software that we have in the district. So it's like all the software that we use and a whole bunch of other things, administrative costs through BOCES that are tied into that. Curriculum development and supervision. This is generally staff members in this building that work in instruction. Employee benefits, that's self-explanatory. Finances, the finance department. And then we get into lesser items. Staff is staff in this building as well. And then supervision of schools, that is all of the building principals and APs. So those are people who work within the buildings. Any questions about the administrative budget? Okay. Program budget, this is all things tied to instruction, generally speaking, including student transportation and all the benefits associated with all the staff members. I don't have a lot more to share about that, unless there's questions. Okay, capital budget, this is operations and maintenance staff, along with everything relating to running the buildings. So, you know, the gas and electric, all those types of things, along with debt service payments for buses and buildings, and all the benefits for employees. So when looking budget to budget, the percentages are consistent. So 10% for administrative, 17% for capital, and 73% for instruction or program budget. And here's a breakdown per dollar. Again, most of our costs are tied up in salary and employee benefits. We're a people business. And so that's where our money is going to be spent. And then we get into the lesser costs. Any questions about how we spend our money from a breakdown perspective? I know we went over this already, so. Okay. So propositions. So really looking at 4 propositions. That's the proposal, the expenditure budget, a bus purchase, and again, we're in this year, we were the second district in the state to be approved for the NYSERDA grant for electric vehicles, electric buses. We're receiving 2 in May or June. We are the first in Western New York, so that was a big win for the district. With that being said, if we end up on the diesel plan, that price could be a little bit lower, not much lower, just slightly lower, but we're asking for the approval of the slightly higher number so that if we do get awarded the grant, we get the electric buses. Mind you that the cost to operate the buses, especially given the major influx in fuel cost, is significantly lower with an electric vehicle. And so the amount of money that we spend out at the end of the day for an electric vehicle, I know we went over this in January, is significantly less. Establish a capital reserve for security infrastructure. So this relates to both our kind of head-end unit for our security systems in the buildings, specifically to our door controls and our door sensors, and then also upgrading our camera infrastructure because we're getting to the point where we should be planning to start replacing that infrastructure over the next couple of years. And in order to start replacing it, we need to save up some money to do it. And so if we approve this, then we can start funding it in July. And really with the close of this fiscal year, we can start funding it to some level so that we can start potentially in the next year getting public approval to spend out of that reserve. So we can't spend money next year unless we put a proposition out to the public to spend the money. And we can't put a proposition out to the public to spend the money until there's money in the reserve. That's the regulation. So likely next May, we would look to put out a proposition to use some funding if we're able to fund that reserve at all, and it is publicly approved. we look to put out a proposition to spend some of that money next May for the following year. And then a use of capital reserve for technology. So we are trying to replace devices in buildings. We're doing it this year. We hope to do it again next year, but again, to use a capital reserve, we need public approval. Any question about the propositions? No. Board of Education elections, there's 3 seats available to 3-year terms. Dr. Christine Brown Richards, Francis Moscato, and Michael Bailey. Those seats are up, and so petitions will be due to the district clerk by Monday, April 18th by 5 p.m. Is that correct? By 5 p.m. Any questions about that? Next steps. So budget adoption tonight, hopefully. Board petitions due again on the 18th, the budget hearing on the 3rd, and then the budget vote and board election on the 17th. Any questions? The budget vote will be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Field House is where we ended up. Yeah. Okay. Summary, our intention is to maintain current programming and staffing, continue with the goals, use our state and federal funding to increase intervention and mental health support, so increasing AIS and the social emotional supports. Continue to provide multiple opportunities for student engagement and acknowledge that it's a balanced budget and it does use exhaustible reserves and fund balance. Okay, so our questions. Are there any items that need clarification?
Just one point. Sometimes boards are criticized for approving a budget. We don't approve the budget. We propose the budget. And I think it's important for the public to at least think about that for a moment. All we can do is present, through the staff and our discussions, what we view as the most reasonable, cost-effective budget to meet our goals, to provide our students with a well-rounded educational opportunity, and to meet the needs of the kids, or anything else. But it is ultimately up to the public to approve the budget. So, we do adopt a proposed budget. We're not, tonight we're not going to approve the budget as such. So it's just a small point of clarification, but it does come up quite often in the rhetoric surrounding elections and surrounding discussions about school boards and their roles. All right, so our role of developing the budget with the staff is important. It's one of our most critical roles, but we do not approve it. The public does. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And does this reflect our goals and priorities? We're comfortable with this budget proposal to put out for referendum? Okay. Okay, so moving on. Thank you very much for participating tonight. Now, I think it's my turn again. So one of the things that we've been talking about at the Finance Facility and Audit Committee is the creation of and funding of a workers' compensation reserve. And so before I talk about that, I know I've shared this before, but I just want to hand it out.
Thank you.
This is just something from the Office of the State Comptroller talking about what the intended use of reserves are, and talks a little bit about how it's kind of like a savings plan for specific purposes. The comptroller says right in there that it's not a slush fund, so it's not money that we can just dip into. When you talk about our reserves, we went over this last year, all of those reserves that were up on the board, those are all intended for very specific purposes and established for very specific purposes to help relieve any variability in budget. So if, for instance, we had a major workers' comp claim. And although we're in a consortium and we get, kind of like an annual fee every year, if we have some really costly claims come in, it affects how much we pay for workers' comp. And so really what we're looking to do is create a workers' comp reserve to reduce our exposure, so it's a protective measure, so that if we did have an issue down the road, we wouldn't have to cut programs and services to kids. We could dip into the reserve that is for a very specific purpose. So workers' compensation reserves, towns and municipalities create these as well, towns and villages, and so they're governed under general municipal law, and so they're used to pay compensation and benefits, medical, hospital, and other expenses authorized by workers' compensation law for programs. And so we can maintain it, and it's created by a resolution of the board. So the plan will be at the next board meeting to have a resolution, if the board is amenable to it, that the board would approve to create this reserve. So this one, unlike a capital reserve, which is governed by another piece of legislation, this one doesn't have to be approved by the community. It needs to be approved by the board, which is the case for almost all reserves. Most of them are established by the board and not by the community. With the capital reserve is really the main exception. And again, a referendum is not required to create or expend the money. So again, with a capital reserve, for instance, we have to have public approval to both create and expend any money from those reserves. So where are the sources of funds? Budgetary appropriations. And then again, there's some wording on unexpended funds and balances. We wouldn't want to fund this any more than about 2 to 3 years of expenses. Right now, on average, we're at about $650,000 a year in workers' comp costs. So if there's major variation there, that could become a problem. Some years we've had around 400, some years 650, but when it goes up to 650, then we have to take that from somewhere in order to fund it, and that's really where it becomes a challenge. So again, I left that estimate blank because we are still talking, but we're talking in the range of $200,000 to $250,000. Again, over the last few years, we've seen that fluctuation of about $250,000. So we're looking to look at those estimates over time and fund it to a level that kind of matches those fluctuations so that we can use the reserve to help balance our budget. Look to do it on the 26th and again use unappropriated fund balance to fund it. So any questions about a workers' compensation reserve or any of the details that I've discussed this evening? Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Yep, because I was going to ask them any questions when we did it. So now we're going to move on to approval of consensus agenda. Motion, please. Somebody. Littlewood, Ms. Littlewood, Ms. Coffey, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. Now can we have approval of consensus item, motion to approve consensus items B through I. Motion, please. Ms. Coffey, Mr. Moscato, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. Next, can I have a motion to approve the 2022-2023 Board of Education proposed budget? Motion? Ms. Coffey, Ms. Littlewood, all in favor? Vote is unanimous. Next, I have a motion to approve the 2022-2023 annual budget and propositions. Motion? Ms. Coffey, Mr. Moscato, all in favor? The vote is unanimous. Motion to approve the 2022-2023 property tax report card. Motion. It's long. Coffee. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Motion to approve the Monroe to Orleans BOCES administrative budget of $8,673,365 for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Motion. Ms. Coffey. Mr. Long? Yes. All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Okay, so motion to vote on the Monroe to Orleans BOCES board candidates. Resolved to cast one vote each for the election of Mr. Gerald Marr, representing Brockport Central School District for a term of office which will begin on July 1 of 2022 and end June 30th of 2025. Mr. Dennis Laba, we can do them all together. Okay. Representing Gage Child Central School District for a term of office which will begin July 1, 2022 and end June 30th, 2025. And Ms. Trina Lorenz, representing Holly Central School District for a term of office which will begin July 1, 2022 and end June of 2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Long. Ms. Coffey. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Can I have a motion to approve a 5-year agreement effective July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2026 between the GCTA and the Gage Child Central School District that includes adjustments to the terms, conditions, wages, and benefits of employment of unit members? Motion, please. Ms. Littlewood and Mr. Moscato. All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Can I have a motion to approve the terms and conditions of employment for managerial, confidential, supervisory, and exempt personnel effective July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2025? Motion. Ms. Littlewood. Mr. Long. All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Motion to approve the installment purchase agreement with Monroe to Orleans BOCES for copier printers to be placed at the following locations: Neil Armstrong Elementary School, Florence Bradshaw Elementary School, Walt Disney Elementary School, Paul Rowe Elementary School, Gage Child Middle School, Gage Child High School, Gage Child District Office, and Gage Child Transportation Building. Motion, please. Ms. Coffey. Ms. Littlewood. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Motion to approve high school parking lot expansion bids and contractual agreements. Motion, please. Mr. Moscato. Ms. Coffey. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Motion to approve construction management agreement. Motion, please. Ms. Littlewood. Mr. Long. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. Motion to approve the resolution for probationary administrative appointment for Andrea Kataya in the tenure area of building principal. Motion, please. Ms. Coffey. Mr. Long. All in favor? The vote is unanimous. We congratulate her again. And now we're at superintendent comments.
Okay, we'll start off with calendar update. We will have a longer Memorial Day weekend this year. Due to not needing our snow days this year, all students and staff will have the Friday before Memorial Day weekend off as well. And with that, the last days for students, which will be communicated out later this week, K through 5 will have a half day on Thursday, June 23rd. That will be their last day. The middle school's last 2 days will be June 21st and 22nd, and those will be half days. And the high school last day of full classes is June 13th due to regents and finals going on through June 23rd. And we'll be communicating that out to our community shortly. Right now, our award-winning educational budget series is back again.
Hey there, Spartans. I'm Dr.
Week
Mitch
1
Ball,
of A
the
Bit
Assistant
of Budget with
Superintendent
Dr.
for
Ball
Business
went
here at
live
Cape
yesterday.
Skyline.
This
This
week,
is
Dr. Ball
A Bit of
covers the
Budget
size of our
with
operation
Dr. Ball.
and explains what our school budget funds. Each episode features important budget information and a
You
healthy
ask for an
dose of
encore,
moves
and though it'll
that
be
only
a hard
Dr.
act to
Ball is
follow,
capable
I am
of.
answering the call. Except
This series will run every Monday from now until May 16th, so be sure to check it out on our district's YouTube channel. And earlier it was referred to by both our state senator and Mr. Moscato, but our GC PAC opening was a tremendous night. We had outstanding support from our Gates Charlie community at our grand opening. It was a great night to celebrate our new venue and the tremendous talent that our Spartans have that has been cultivated by our outstanding staff. A huge thank you to Mrs. Petrosino, Mrs. Kuhn, our school nutrition team led by Mrs. Phillips, and the music department for creating a world-class environment for our community. And again, a reminder that any board candidates, that their signed petitions for spots on the GC BOE are due by April 18th at 5 p.m. I'm excited again to share that we have been selected for the Democrat Chronicle's Top Workplace for the Large Business category for the second year in a row, and one of only 3 businesses in the entire Rochester metropolitan area to be awarded for our diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. The event on May 25th is where we'll find out our final rankings within. Thank you to all the faculty and staff that took the time to take the anonymous survey to qualify us for this outstanding recognition. This morning is one of the highlights of our year. It was our top 20 breakfast at the high school, where we celebrate our top 20 students in the senior class. It was amazing to hear what they'll be studying and doing in the future. We have some going into the trades, some going into the military as well. So our kids are set up for success due to the quality environment created at that high school by Mr. Hamill and his team. And last night, much like Mr. Moscato said, I was able to attend the Academic Varsity Letters presentation. And it was just neat to see such a great group of kids being honored for being dedicated to being outstanding students. And another great ceremony of having our new PAC. So we're very proud of all that they've accomplished so far. And also, we're able to announce that our commencement ceremony for this year's graduating class will be at 4:30 on June 22nd in Spartan Stadium. We'll have more information out for our families and community shortly, but we're excited to host it again and do one ceremony versus multiple, which will be a lot easier on families and the kids. Our music and merriment announcement. On Wednesday, May 11th, from 4 to 6 p.m. in the middle school cafeteria, we'll have our annual Senior Citizens concert and dinner in person again. The Spartan Original Singers and the middle school jazz band will perform, followed by a free pasta dinner for senior residents of both the towns of Gates and Chili. Tickets are available at the towns of Gates and Chili Recreation Senior Centers or our middle school main office beginning April 15th. And last, yesterday we had a neat award. One of our teachers was awarded the Golden Apple. So Gates Chili High School FACS teacher, Kate Mangus, is the latest GC educator to win a Golden Apple Award. High school student Mercedes Taylor nominated her for the award after taking her Intro to Culinary Arts class this fall. She said of her teacher, "Mrs. Mangus is kind of like my school mom, telling me the right things to do and making sure I do good in school." Taylor surprised Ms. Mangus with the award yesterday, which was presented to her at school by WROC-TV Channel 8. The story will air this coming Tuesday evening, and we'll be sure to share a link on our homepage. That is my presentation, Madam Vice President.
Thank you so much. Nothing else. We will adjourn. Motion to adjourn? You want to adjourn. Mr. Long, Ms. Littlewood. Long and Littlewood. All in favor? We're adjourned.